Welcome to the Curious Builder Podcast. I'm Mark Williams, your host. We're in Boston, for those that are listening and not in the room. We're at the Contractor Coalition. So I am going to introduce each one of you, and I'll let you guys give a brief intro to those that are not in the room. Obviously, everyone here knows everyone pretty well, so this is for those that are listening across the country. So Morgan Molitor, why don't you go kick us off and let us know who you are?
Okay, I am Morgan Molitor. My husband and I run Construction of Style, which is a design build out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. We also run a media company called Neon Line Media, a nonprofit called Resilience to Reform, and then we host two different conferences, one Contractor Coalition Summit, where we're at right now with these lovely gentlemen, and then also Build Her, that's a national conference once a year in Costa Rica for female builders.
This is super nice. I'll just read this.
I did give this, I actually introduced you that way live at Build Buzz, but now
I feel like you should do it again.
Yeah.
So I'm Tyler Grace, owner of TRG Home Concepts, co-host of Modern Craftsman Podcast. I'm a small remodeling contractor out of New Jersey. Smaller renovations. I'm the opposite of Mark.
Nick Schiffer, owner of NS Builders here in Boston, Massachusetts. Also a partner in a media company, a millwork company, Modern Craftsman Podcast, the Summit. Got a couple things going on, and as you wrote here, I have a manic obsession with quality.
You are kind of obsessed with perfection.
Yeah, manic is a good word to describe it, because I've realized recently that I'm waking up in the middle of the night a lot more than I used to. So.
Ooh.
And I'm Brad Levitt, owner and founder of AFT Construction, based in Scottsdale, Arizona, commercial residential builder. I host the Brad Levitt podcast I've had for 5 years now, and one of the founders with Morgan and Nick, and now Tyler, of the Contractor Coalition Summit. Mark has on here on the master of scaling, I guess. So I think when Mark and I met, I had 19 employees. We're at 30 now. So
Is it climbing or growing?
what did he say?
Scaling.
Yeah, scaling. Yeah, it's
When we first met, you were at like 21, and now you're at 31.
yeah. So we have an incredible team. I mean, I couldn't do what I do without them. So very fortunate for all those back at home.
I mean, that's actually the first question I have is, this whole topic, we could talk about anything for days on end, but we all need to eat, sleep, and other things in life too. So this one is really going to be more about innovation, how to future-proof your business, and then towards the end, we're going to talk a little bit about AI, which is a little bit of a recap of what Morgan and I presented earlier this week at CBUSA for anyone that was there. But Brad, let's start with you. I think you have by far the largest company of the four builders up here. How have you, when you started your company, did you begin with the end in mind? And I say that by, you very well could sell your company today. You could sell it whenever you choose to. Most builders, I would feel, can't, because they haven't either thought about it, or they never realized it, or they get too far down the road and you're like, wow, I don't have the systems in place to even do that. So can you speak a little bit to your journey of how you really were intentional in thinking about building your company so that, you could sell it?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I don't know if I envisioned to where I'm at today specifically, but one thing I will say, and it's no shot against anyone how they name their company, but I was very adamant to not name the company after myself. Like, that was very intentional. I knew at some point, somewhere down the road, that I would like to eventually sell AFT. I mean, maybe I don't. I mean, who knows what then the end will be, but for sure throughout the journey, I mean, fortunately before I started AFT, I did work, and Jeff and I were talking about this at lunch a little bit, is that I was fortunate to work for a large company before I started mine, and so worked on some pretty unique projects. And because of that, I don't want to say I was intimidated. I just never was about growing like a bigger company and developing people. Anyone that knows me, I'm really obsessed with business. I've become more obsessed with business, and so the entrepreneurship arm, systems, like bettering our organization every day has always been a big focus. And I've seen how that's led to like growth of the people that work for me as they've stepped into additional roles, how that's worked for personal freedom for me with the company. And along those lines, we actually just made a change, because for a long time, people thought of AFT as myself, the face of the brand. And I sat down with my media guy end of last year, and I told Jesse, I'm like, hey, moving forward, I actually don't want to do any YouTube anymore. So anyone that follows my YouTube channel, they only see me on my personal house that I'm building. Outside of that, it's my team. And the whole point is to kind of separate from the brand a little bit, so that at some point the face of AFT is a lot of my people, and a lot of people that follow AFT, you'll see that everyone that works for me, they have their own AFT handle, they engage, they have their own audience, they have their own following, and they're very active. And so the whole point is that it builds the overall brand, but they each have their own unique personalities in it. And it just has allowed us to scale and people to have more pride in the company itself and what we're doing. And so that part's been enjoyable. And I've seen now for sure that's led into like other plans that we have in the years to come.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Nick, any thoughts on what the future? I mean, I know your mission statement is to build really cool homes for really cool people. And
No, say what he really says.
Yeah, well, he can say it in his own words. Thank you, Brad. You're going to have to wait your turn, sir. But, what would be some of your long-term goals in being able to sell NS Builders? I mean, you seem very deliberate in how you've identified like a Nick Schiffer brand. I mean, I see, we just got done listening to Morgan speak a little bit about branding, and each one of you has sort of, I've seen your companies evolve even in the last 2 years with intentionality, especially Brad, like he just was demonstrating, like being very thoughtful about, Nick Schiffer as a brand spokesman, but also NS. I mean, you have all these companies, they all tie back to you. How are you thinking about that in terms of selling it in the future, or what is kind of your master plan as you consider this? Because you've come from, working as a superintendent to putting on the bags, as you say, to now, you're leading kind of this cool empire.
Yeah, I haven't given it much thought in terms of like actually selling my company. That's not something that's on my roadmap. I guess for me, it is my roadmap and the way I think about the future is all around what we leave behind, and in terms of our product. I walked you through White Oak, and I hope I made it clear my obsession with what I'm trying to do there, and the uncompromised effort to get that is, a testament to what I would like to continue to do, but continue to prove that there's a market for that. So for me, it's about building cool shit with cool people. I like working with a cool team. I like working really hard. I like working with people that want to, that give a shit, but also just want to put their head down and try to figure it out. And I try to balance that. I'm a dad of 4. I got a family, and forever growing up prior to kids, it would be like work around the clock. And now it's, I try to be more intentional with that, where it's when I'm home, I'm family. But when I'm at work, I want it to be like work, like hard, like stressful. And in some weird, like, kind of, self-deprecating way.
You love the extreme ownership, and we've talked about this before, right?
Yeah.
That ties into that, right?
Yeah, and it's, like, for me, but also for my team, right? Like, I'm a huge proponent of don't come to me with an issue. Talk to me about, like, how are we doing this? What is the solution to a problem? What is the solution to, getting what we're trying to accomplish done, and thinking outside the box. For me, my role in the company has changed, as you said, and I think about, I try to be there for my team in the sense of when they are stuck, I can come on the job site and walk them through how to accomplish what they're trying to do. I will make an absolute mess doing it, but I will get from A to Z. And then, in more words or less words, I basically say, now do that, but do it better. And I think that's where, my strength has been in my company and growing the team, is that I can help guide and give direction, but what I'm not good at is the actual execution, because my brain is somewhere else. And I think that, early in my career, I've been in business for 10 years now. Early that's something I ignored. I was bags on, and then I was trying to run a business at night, and it was a mess. And, and when I lose sight of what my strength is in my company, it's when stuff unravels.
I feel like we share, I'm not quite as, the mania part we share very much similar, but your obsession with, quality and self-improvement, because you can actually do a lot of the things I can't do. I've struggled with people on my team where and maybe this is a ownership issue where, we want self-improvement. All of us are very, whether you're reading books or listening to podcasts or you want to improve. And sometimes it's difficult when people on your team don't have that same hunger and you don't know what to do with that. Could you speak a little to that? Because I feel like last year when we talked, you had just talked about how, you've talked about two things. One is that you would bring people on your team, and if they could do your job within 60%, you got to hire them because you have to allow, but they have to get better. And then the second part of that question really is, how long do you let them sort of? How do you rationalize as an owner that they don't have the owner mindset, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But how do you balance that within yourself? Because I feel like a lot of owners struggle with that.
I did struggle with it, and I had a long talk. Speaking of extreme ownership, which is kind of the Jocko mentality, I was a big proponent of it, and Ken, who's my partner in the millwork company, would always fight me on it when I pushed him towards it. Where it's like, you're talking about a bunch of Navy SEALs; those are the top human beings in the world, dude, like working together. And I had the opportunity to talk to Leif.
The Nate's Army Ranger, right? You just gave me a dirty look.
One of the top. But I remember being with, I had the opportunity to be with Leif and Jocko, and I had asked that question. I was like, hey, is everyone an A player? And he looked at me and he laughed. He goes, absolutely not. We got some C's, we got some D's. Everyone has a place though. And it's the, right, it's making sure that they're in the right seat. So, there's some times where they're on the wrong bus, but oftentimes they're just in the wrong seat. And for me, it's, understanding like, hey, I don't care if you want to come in, punch in at 9, work till 3, but like when you're here, you're here. And, and you got to get your job done. If you can come in and run 3 jobs and they're all on time, on budget, of the quality that we need, and you work 2 hours a day, like I'll pay you whatever you want, because that's crazy. But that's what it's about. It's, come in and deliver on what the expectation is. And if you don't want to continue to improve and that's where you're at, like, just know that that's where you're at. There isn't this, kind of rewarding growth of a career behind that, because that's ultimately their decision to be where they are.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, to Nick's point, there's a lot of value as you grow to understand that they're in the right seat, right? And that's something that took me some time. In fact, truth be told, it wasn't until a couple of years ago that actually Nick and 4 other builders came and audited my organization. And the feedback was that I had a lot of the right people, but they're in the wrong seat. And so in the last 18 months, really last 20 months, we spent a considerable amount of time, updating roles and responsibilities and putting people, like changing actual positions, from field to office, office to field. And it's amazing the difference that it made, because now you put them in a position where it's very clear, the definition of what their role is. And so the competition between them, or the desire to not let teammates down, being in the right seat, they're excelling on what their skill set is, and then creating that competitive environment in a way, they come to the table innovative with other ideas and how to better the system. And so we're at a point now, 20 months later after that audit from my team, that people are on the right seat. And, I'm sitting in meetings and they're bringing up stuff they're doing or changes they're making. I'm like, that's awesome. I had no idea, right? Because they're automatically like being innovative with stuff in the field that, just betters the brand. So.
Well, I love that you've empowered your people. You told me yesterday that you really love building people. You love building companies. And, I think it was yesterday while we were sitting at dinner, you're like, hey, we just hired somebody. Like, you didn't even know who it was. And like, I know I can't relate to that necessarily because I run a small company of 4, but I actually have made a decision because I'm such an optimist. I feel like I operate where optimism and delusion meet. And so that makes me a pretty bad to hire people because I'm just too optimistic. Makes me a good remodeler, I guess. But the point is, I've told my team now moving forward that they are responsible for hiring everyone in our company, because then the culture stays in the same cycle, and I have a little bit of distance to like, you also hired these people. Like, I suppose it's going to come down to me to obviously give it the final stamp, also maybe to fire someone. But
well, I think in the last 12 people we've hired, I interviewed 0 of them. And I didn't meet them until after their first day of starting with the company. Like, I wasn't even involved until they started. I'm like, welcome to AFT, the last 12. the funny thing about this one is this is the first one that I didn't even know we were hiring. I didn't know we were
gosh.
opening to hire. And then Spencer said, welcome to the team that's new super. And I was like, oh, I guess we're hiring. We need a fit. But that's the level of trust I have in Spencer to look at our bottom line and the roles we need to fill. And so the other 12, he had asked me, hey, we're looking at this position. And this one he just hired. I'm like, oh, I guess we hired a super yesterday. And here I'm in Boston. So
That's awesome.
I think this is meant to be encouraging, not discouraging. But so I've been building for 20 years, and I went to my first contractor coalition 2 years ago. And my point is that years of service does not equate like how far you are in your journey. And I think Brad, 11 years.
Yeah, 11
And
years.
you're light years ahead of where I am and ever will be, or frankly want to be. But that's not the point. The point is I've looked at people the wrong way. I used to always think of people, not in a negative way, but like, more people, more problems, and just like, scaling. But every time I've hired someone, my stress level has gone down. I mean, when I used to project manage everything myself, and now as soon as I was like, why didn't I do that a long time ago? And now, I don't really want to scale massively. I want to scale to a point that I'm not so involved in the day and day. And the only way to do that through people is, and every time I hire someone that I like, I'm like, why did I not do this earlier? And it took me a long time in my career to figure that out. And so,
I love that.
Tyler, for yourself, you have 0 employees, is that right? Or is it just yourself?
One part-time and subcontractors.
Yeah. And have you thought, I hear you even talking a little bit about brand deals and the Modern Craftsman. I know you dedicate specific amount of time to that. How are you looking at your future now? Is it any different, or is that something you're pretty much going to stay locked in at in how you operate?
No, at least not for the next 2 years with everything that I have going on. But everything switched a couple of years ago, and like business transitioned to where it is now, and volume went down, but margins went up. And with my market and my customer base, it's tough to offset the amount of work I'd have to put in place to make marginally more money. So diversifying the business, I think that like, as I transition to my model that I have now, diversifying some and understanding that like I wasn't as hungry for work to feed the machine, and that like the machine was slightly broken as is, I realized I was able to analyze, engage, and inventory my business and really hone in on who I am, what I do, who my client is, and differentiating myself to hone in on my ideal client. And I have a pretty good situation with where I am, the amount of work that I have to do, and all my other ventures that I have going on, that it's a very comfortable spot to be in financially, and also from an emotional standpoint with like everything in my life, struggles that I have, anxiety that I have, family-wise, like this is the healthiest that I've been, physically, financially also. So I'm good there.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah. It's funny how as our personal health, and maybe this is, we not go off script here, but just talking about wellness, because
anyway.
So much of it, if I'm a big proponent, like if you love it, do it, or if you're passionate about it, find a way through it, right? Mm-hmm. And speak a little bit to, you've had an interesting couple of years as you sort of honed in on that for yourself, and Tyler talks about all the time on the Modern Craftsman as well, but what has kind of been your journey, both with empowering your team, because we're kind of on this team focus right now in your business, but also balancing like how you feel rejuvenated? Because I just gave you a compliment earlier. I've seen you speak a lot. This was the calmest. You've always known the information, so it's never been about that. But it's like you are a calmer person.
Yeah.
You are more assured, and as your friends.
I was like, it's funny. I was going to tell her that after.
Aw.
Yeah, that was her best presentation.
Oh, thank you.
100% agreed, Nick. And I was like, I've sat on a number of panels with
Yeah.
you, and it's interesting as your friend and someone who cares about you, both professionally and personally. It's like, it's really neat to see the people around us develop. And especially as we, we have all of us have podcasts essentially. You're on enough podcasts that you basically at this point have your own podcast. But like the point is like I think what makes it real is people are authentic and people share with the struggle and share what they're going through, so then everyone can relate to it. Because ownership and being in a business can be very lonely. It's like this island.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to the question. How have you, if you were to self-reflect a little bit on your journey over the last 2 years, what have been some key things from empowering your team to even just recognizing what you need?
Yeah. Well, I would say I just got to read the book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Bleep. No, I would just say. No, I don't know.
I mean, my mom's not here to wash them out with the soap this time, Nick.
No, there, he answered it for me.
Oh, she can fly here fast.
Yeah. No, I'd say, a couple of years ago, I just had a moment where I was just like, this industry is a lot and it's stressful. And I won't get into the details. You can listen to another podcast where I shared it on his. But after that, I was like, I just have to change. And I think it was kind of cool to see how different people, whether it was the team or people in the industry or friends, right? Like all these guys right here just like stepped up. Oh my gosh, I can't cry. So, oh my God.
It's a big life-changing thing. It's a good thing.
Yeah.
I don't think, not everyone talks about it, but I don't feel that this is the business to promote a healthy lifestyle. And I think that things do need to change there. And I think that oftentimes we put ourselves last and make sure that everyone else is taken care of, our customers are taken care of, and whatever is feeding that, whether it's ego, determination, drive, I don't think it promotes and creates the healthiest lifestyle. So I think that when people do figure that out and find a balance between everything that we're discussing and living a healthy, enjoyable lifestyle, it's really important and really impressive.
Well, I mean, just to echo that, what's interesting, I don't know if this is factually backed up, but they say like the suicide rate's really high in construction, right? I think I can speak to even, a lot of us stand up here.
Close.
Yeah. I mean, the reality is like as much as I've worked on building our business, there's times where I'm sure like many of us, you want to give up and be like, why am I doing this? Like it's so stressful and so difficult. And you think about the healthy side, like Tyler's saying, just for fun, our production meeting, we have these icebreakers that we'll do, like, what's your favorite place to go on vacation? So this last one we had last week, Spencer said, what do you eat for lunch? Like, what's your normal lunch? And after we went through 30 employees, I'm like, we need like a nutritionist in my office. Because like 90% of them are like, I have an energy drink and like a bag of Skittles or something. I'm like, how are you alive? I mean, honestly, and I'm going around thinking how stressful, the day-to-day is for them to manage clients. Our clients are really tough to manage subcontractors and trade partners and suppliers and all the issues that go on to run a job, and yet they're just having an energy drink for lunch. I'm like, have a heart attack.
It's interesting. I don't expect everyone to do everything that you do, but ultimately, if you're very open, you show it. I mean, I'm very much into health and wellness just because I'm sort of fascinated by it, but it's also a passion, to your point. Like you see people in your office, when I buy lunch, I usually pay for everyone, so I order what I want to eat, and and they eat it. And it's like, to your point, I haven't actually considered, like, if I just left them order their own thing, what would they order? But it probably wouldn't be what I'm ordering. Not that what I'm ordering is perfect, but to your point, I've talked to other builders too that are they want to support their people where they're at. And I think if we're going to take time off for our mental health, and I say that, like, I've talked a lot about this on the podcast, like at 5 o'clock, like I'm done. Like I'm home every day at 5. It's important to my family. It's important to my wife. I couldn't be here if 5:05. Everyone, it's 5:05. There's a little grace period. 5:06, like, bring the guillotine. But anyway, the point is I've actually embraced that, and it's helped me. I know I'll have a longer career because I've set some of those things. And so it's funny how sometimes people might perceive a limitation. It's actually an extender, because if we can't prevent ourselves from burning out, whether we're getting our energy from people, from whatever we're doing, but also you see it in your employees. And sometimes I poke a little bit on my a couple year reviews, and I'll be like, hey, Mike, what motivates you? What are you interested in? Sometimes it's like pulling teeth, and they're not probably as open as some of us, and so it's hard to kind of figure out like what makes their motor tick.
Well, I mean, Tyler's been open about his health thing. Morgan hers, I had a stroke last year, Father's Day weekend. Whether that's all related, there's an element to the amount of stress. Nick just drinks cold brew, and I don't know, it's really gross, but like he somehow doesn't get
Anyone
sick.
listening to this podcast across the country, NS Builders and the Cruise Builder are looking for cold brews. I'm right there with you, buddy.
He loves that thing, but he doesn't get sick, so he's fine. But the rest of us have been stressed out.
Yeah, but okay, I'm not going to cry now, so I can answer that question. But I would say with that, so I made a shift a year and a half ago, and it's like now I have done boundaries, right? And that was one thing, I think, especially in this industry, that I let a lot of people, even clients, all that, cross. And I would say too, just with my personality, Jamie and I talk about this all the time, we're a team, but like when there was problems or fires, like these clients or people or teammates, they would come to me because they know that I would just be like, I don't want to say a pushover, but I'd just be like, sure, yes, because I love people, right? And then whereas, you know, someone else on our team or Jamie would be like, absolutely not, or this or that. So I think there was a lot of like taken advantage of. And so then anyway, with the shift and whatnot, it's like now every morning I have a routine. And I'm like, if I don't start it that way, and that's like getting up in the morning, I put a podcast in my ear, an audiobook the second I wake up at the same time. And that's kind of what sets my intention for the day. And I get up, I get moving, I get stretching, and just like kind of a slow morning, but get into my rhythm and my time. And like for me, that's like my you time, like my me time that I need. And if I don't have that, then it's so I started doing that with boundaries and all that. And of course I have a supportive husband, because a lot of people online too will be like, I could never do that. And I'm like, well, you can, you just have to do it.
Well, I think my favorite quote this last year, I've said it a lot, is boundaries create freedom. And so, you had mentioned previously that you used to say yes to everything.
Yeah.
And then your New Year's resolution a year ago was like to say no to everything.
Yeah.
Which I thought, like,
Tyler and I literally exchanged a conversation last week about that. Yeah. It's like, you know what? I think no is going to be a new.
I know, which is really hard for me, but it's good. It's like it's never been more refreshing. And just like,
because what business owner can't relate to a canceled meeting and your stress level goes down because you just gain some time.
Yeah.
The thing that's interesting, going back to you, Nick, a little bit about how I think you sort of operate really well stressed and you sort of need deadlines, if I had to guess, is that you get too much free time and then you fill it with either dumb stuff or you're not as productive because now all of a sudden you're so used to sort of working under this intense schedule. It's a little bit like maybe we're like airplanes. We overbook all the time. No wonder people are unhappy. And so it's like, but then when we free up some capacity, we either fill it up with something that's not important or we waste it.
Yeah, and something too.
It's like, what am I going to do until 6 p.m.? I'll clean my inbox. I'll sort through my mail.
Yeah.
I'll start a new business. Great idea.
I'll download an AI tool and learn how to use that.
Yeah, which is a good thing. That's not a bad thing. But a couple of like tools. So I'd say that too. Like I have the right tools in place and the right people to lean on and to go to advice for or whatnot when I have to like overcome something. But my best one is like no is a complete sentence. And you don't have to give an explanation. You don't have to say anything. It's just a no. And then also, like, you don't have to answer everything. And I think for me, I always thought I have to answer it or I have to help or I have to guide. And it's like, no, you don't have to do that. Like, if someone texts you, you don't have to reply. Like, I've been practicing that more and more. And I'm like, oh, that's actually freeing. Like, I don't owe them a response.
My wife is listening.
Not you.
I've looked at, like, a lot of perspective has changed where I've gauged how my customers make a living. And our industry is like so fierce and so competitive and driven by efficiency and productivity. And then I'll spend a day at home and my wife works for a company and I'm like, you have so much free time. And then I'm like, my clients, I'm like, and she knows it, but like my clients are every other industry. It's not like my customers expect everyone who's on the job to not take a break, to not check their phone, to not go to the bathroom.
To be accessible. We've talked about that.
For this amount of money, but then they go to work and they can go get paid to take a lunch. They can go walk down and talk to somebody in the office. And I'm like, every other industry is built different than ours. And I'm like, how can we translate and transfer that into our industry? And it's not to that extent, but like there needs to be some of that buffer and that burden built into our business where like somebody's inefficient, somebody makes a mistake, we're not paying for that. And I think that like trying to find a model that fits that and a client that understands that has been huge for me to create some of that freedom and lack of anxiety where it's like my stomach's in my throat because you made a mistake, you're 10 minutes behind schedule, you're not going to be able to make a meeting, or you're a day behind, you're a day late on something. It's probably not the industry to be in if you like caffeine and have anxiety.
Which we all do.
But it's too late to turn back at this point.
Either put this train back on the rails, and this one's for you, Morgan, because I feel like you have more tools. We just had our conference earlier this week with, you're really at the forefront of a lot of the AI technologies, but how do you balance with implementing tools that helps the team without overwhelming them? And speaking as someone who's like, every time I go to a conference, I come back and, I've got 800 ideas 57 things I want to implement, and my team is just like dreading our Monday morning ops meeting. And I've actually gotten much better. I now like lay it all out and I say, you choose the ones you want to work on. But anyway, that's how I've handled it. How do you handle it with your team so that they either have ownership or so that you don't overwhelm them and just burn them out?
Gosh, that's a hard one, especially because Ethan's standing here and we just hired him a few weeks ago and he was like, how many tools, like where do these live? How do I like wrap my head around them? I was like, oh gosh, my hero's thinking we didn't have a lot. But I'd say for our team, one, we want to encourage them, or for me, I'm always thinking about our exit strategy and I'm always trying to replace myself. And I'm also trying to tell our team, you guys should be working on replacing yourself too. And I want our entire team to live and breathe like this company is their own. I don't want them to quit. I don't want them to go anywhere. I want Construction of Style to be able to support their life goals. And I think too, with all the people on our team, different things mean, some it's finances. Others it's not. They just want to live, they have different goals that they're trying to hit. So for me, it's like defining the people on our team, what they want and how Construction of Style can help support them to reach their goals. And with that, like tools in place, I'm just a huge component of course, too, being like forward thinkers. That's one of our big visions and goals of our company. And I want them to be exploring tools. And so when I learn new tools, I'm like, hey, this is what I learned. Like, check it out. If it works for you, great. And I always do a Loom video, which I'll talk about tomorrow, but I'll just do like one quick video and then it lives in the library. So then too, they don't have to like continuously go through it, or I'm not sitting there showing all the different people on our team.
Use that resource?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Or your team's
Because
awesome.
Kayla implements it, like make sure, right, that everyone's doing that. But I'll just say too, like when I'm doing this, I'll be like, this is why I found this successful. This is how much time is taking off my plate. Because truly, I want the people on our team to be able to have their freedom too. But also, we got to get the job done and be successful, and we all want to make money. So,
is it accurate to say that you're essentially researching it, you're modeling it? If it works for you, you're making it available to the team to support them. They're watching you. They see the benefit that it has for you, and then you leave the decision whether they adopt it to them.
I would say there's some tools, for example, on like our scheduling tool, like they have to use those. And ones that cost us obviously a lot of money. I'm like, if it is something that is a process for client work, like you have to use that tool and we have to follow this process. But also with that, Jamie and I want from our entire team, like we want them all to be bought in. It's not up to us and the decisions we make. So even when we just hired Ethan, like we had our entire team sit down with him, take him to lunch, get to know him, because we wanted to make sure that they were comfortable with it. They knew that they're going to work with him. So we do the same thing with tools too. We all have to be on the same page. We all have to be bought into the tool. And then for those tools, everyone has to be on the same page. Also, this is on the Neon Line side, and I actually should start this on the C2S one. But every Friday, I have it on my calendar. Whatever I learn that week, I send them a Loom video. It usually has to do with tools or something that just rolled out with social media, or maybe it was something I learned about leadership or with a client. So I'll just send a quick 5-minute Loom video to be like, hey, I just learned this week. I wanted to share it with you guys. Not everyone watches that, but at least, they know that this is what I learned, and I encourage them to. Like, if you guys learned anything this week, share it with the team. I don't require that, but we also are all remote, so we don't have an office that we work at. So that's just kind of my touch point too, to keep one another on the same page. And we all use Slack too, so it's we're constantly in there chatting about the tools we use and different things we learn.
Ethan, I feel your pain, buddy. It sounds like you got a lot of ball. I hope you're a clown, because you need to juggle a lot, buddy. Brad, how have you implemented this with your team? I mean, you seem to have, obviously I see what everyone sees on YouTube or social media where you've got your SOP. I mean, I feel like that's the end result, but I realize there's got to be a lot of cooking in the kitchen before it gets to there. I mean, like your satchel and some of these things that are, I wouldn't say gimmicky, because they come from a real place and they're really valuable. How have you developed some of these systems and ideas throughout the team, and how much are you even involved in that anymore from where you were at the beginning?
Yeah, I'm still pretty involved. I mean, the reality is I was probably similar to you, Mark, where I'd come back from conferences, because I go to continuing education and these events quite often. We have our Builder 22 that we come back with ideas. And I was notorious for coming back and just Tasmanian devil, we're doing this, and my team's just trying to keep up with all this new information I'm just downloading. And so I'm going back to the SWOT analysis we had last January. The counsel that was given to me was put together a leadership team. My team's big enough, and if you're 5 employees or 30 employees, doesn't matter. You still have a leadership council, leadership team. And so now we bounce these ideas together with these core people of each department. So that way we're implementing one at a time or maybe 5 at a time, but either way, it's unanimous with all the members of my leadership team. And then that way we can integrate it properly, we can track it, make sure it's working, before we move it maybe across the whole company. But that's been revolutionary because now they have input and they're part of the implementation. And it's not just my idea, like they're involved with it too. And then they have ideas too that they'll bring, and then now we can figure out what works.
I mean, you have to, I do believe that if you're not innovating and changing, like you're dying, right? I mean, we're like a bunch of sharks. You got to move, in my opinion. And so I just feel like, when people are curious about their business, about life and learning new stuff like that, even if they weren't thinking about it, they innately will keep applying it to their business, and therefore they stay relevant. We obviously live in a very dynamic world, and it's getting faster and faster. Nick, from your point of view, what are some systems and places that you have sort of thought about, future-proofing your business? You didn't talk about necessarily selling it, but, you obviously have an eye on the future of what you want to do. How are you taking steps to, whether it's platforms or systems to get you to where you want to go to build the kind of level of homes that you're doing? I know White Oak is kind of at the centerpiece of that whole thing, but...
My heart.
Yeah. Oh, we got that.
I think it's taking the monotonous tasks off everyone's plate, and getting through, creating systems and creating the structure around something, and committing to it, but knowing that it can change. Job descriptions was something that I struggled with forever, and I just simply couldn't. Anytime I put it together, it was overly detailed, not detailed enough, or it was, people would have a ton of questions as to well, is that my job? Because it's his job. And so, I know we'll get to AI, but that was something I was an early adopter of ChatGPT, and I was like, I'm going to sit down in my office for an entire day, and I'm going to build every single job description and a career path that walks someone through. If you start as an apprentice carpenter and you follow this path, this is how much you will make at each step, and this is how you become second in command. And I remember doing it, and of course, it literally took me all day to I was having a conversation with this computer, and I put it together in a document, and I shared it with my team. My team's like, "Holy shit, this is amazing!" And and then we started, when we were in the hiring process, we would share it with the prospective employee, and they were like, I've never, no one's ever shared something like this. This is I want to work for you. And it was that first time where it's this is where I take advantage of tech and realize that I can create structure and we can commit to it. And when it changes, that's fine. But we don't stop not having a baseline. So that has been really my focus in terms of when I'm working on the business, I'm setting a structure. This is how we're doing it. And then someone's like, well, what if, yeah, that's fine, change it. But right now, everyone has no idea what the basis is. And we're not, we're losing efficiency just plainly because we don't know. So, when to answer your question, that's where all my attention is in terms of future-proofing, is creating the baseline, the operation, the SOPs, the structure around, all of the things that go into the business, so I can focus on the more important tasks. To kind of go off on a little bit of a tangent with that, I think of sales, I talk about the speed between, hey, I want to build a house and building a house. And that time period is really long. But I think from our side, Mark, you said something earlier that I resonate with a lot. It's when a client's talking to you, you always frame it as, hey, I don't want to waste your time. When you really mean, I don't want to waste my time. But I'm also don't want to waste your time. And so for a long time, the lead generation, how a lead would come in, is this intake form on my website. And it had some good information that it would give me a basis of what they were doing, but not everyone filled it out. Or I would call and it would be this back and forth conversation. And I stumbled across this company a couple of years ago that had this conditional questioning form on their website. And it was like having a conversation with someone. It's what's your name? It's Nick. Oh, hey, Nick, what are you looking to do? I'm looking to build. Okay. And depending on how you answer the question, it would get you different responses. And about a month ago, I started building ours out, and we have our first version 1 out. And it basically gets you to a point where you're starting to self-qualify. And I'm continuing to build it where, in 6 months' time, it will basically, you'll get to the end and know whether or not we're a good fit.
When you say build it out, is this through AI where
I'm using Typeform. Typeform is a contact intake form. So essentially, there's, right now, one automation would be, when someone says they're renovating, the next question is, do you plan to move out? And if they say yes, we move on. If they say no, then it goes to a different question and
so do you have to make your whole tree though? I mean, do you have to?
You're building this.
You're building the tree.
And it's literally drag and drop. It's quite simple. And it took me. That was another day project, but I had sat, in my office on the whiteboard and I drew it out because I was like, all right, if we get here, because what I did is I thought about the conversations I have on the phone because we had the same conversation over and over and over and over. So I'm just like, all right, when someone answers it this way, what is my response? And I kept drawing it out and realizing that I can do this and, not necessarily lose the personal touch because they're going to get to the end, right to the point where, going back to the company I found a couple years ago, it would get to the end and say, hey, based on the information you filled out, you're probably between $600,000 and $800,000 for this project. If that sounds like it's in your budget, let's schedule an appointment.
Out of curiosity, how many calls I'm just curious how many people you've disqualified, and I'm sure every business owner thinks a little bit about this, because well, at least at this point, AI and even this Typeform can't be as reactive as we can be as seasoned veterans. But as you're trying to replace yourself and make your sales funnel smaller so it's more accurate and you're identifying your ideal client, how are you, people love people, so it's very personal. And you end up going over some of those same questions again, but you've just obviously identified it. What I guess I'm getting at is how many calls were you getting before you started this, and how many calls are you getting now? I'm just curious what the attrition rate is.
I truthfully don't know that answer, but where I thought you were going with that is, am I concerned with mistakenly disqualifying someone? And I'm not, because ultimately, I don't think if I disqualify someone in that process, if they want to work with me, they're just going to ignore that and call me. Or they're going to say, I want to, there's still an option to schedule time with me. Where it's if they get to the end and oh, I'm totally disqualified, if I'm leaving them with that much of do not talk to me, then at that point, it's probably not a good fit. Right. But I think, the reality is people just want to know. Mm-hmm. They need an answer. So we can go round and around and it's well, I don't know, I think going through a process like that, there is some legitimacy to, providing them hey, based on the information you told me, it's probably within this range. And it's not so much me saying it on the phone. It's just I input the calculation and it spit out a number. And now if that works for me, I should talk to Nick.
Right. I think maybe on April 1st, you can put a you win thing. You just won a video game and your cell phone gets distributed. Tyler, this one just kind of piggybacking on Nick's and Morgan's idea on platforms and tech and things that they're implementing in their team. What are you seeing in the industry building at large in terms of sort of innovating for building's future? And I guess I'm thinking a little bit about prefab and things that you're more tied in than I am about specific products, because they impact your daily. They allow you to gain more margin because you're faster at actually doing the work. What are you seeing that you think that the construction industry is on the path to sort of future-proofing itself? I mean, we have to build no matter what, but how are we making it better, especially as we're having a massive drop in the number of people that can do it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, technology, AI, all that stuff on the back end, but then even working with, we did a video with Anderson and Cape Cod Panel, and they're a very rudimentary fabrication, doing it the way they are, and then bringing it to site, basically all built on paper and modeled, and then transported to the site and stick built at that point. All the panels prefab, but there's companies that are really advanced with that technology, and I think that creates job opportunities for people who don't feel like killing themselves, who can work all year round in a conditioned environment, in a safe environment, in a comfortable environment. it makes the work a little bit more enjoyable. I think that it also increases accuracy. There's less mistakes. It's more profitable. Again, Cape Cod lumber or Cape Cod panel that we went and saw, they're like in the beginning stages of it, and they don't have the money and the processes invested at this point. But still, even the little things that they're doing to increase efficiency is impressive. And then I know that his whole house they essentially built off-site, brought to the site, and it's a very complicated frame, and put that up. And what did you say? How close was it within spec? As far as
This was white oak. It was pre-assembled.
So all the walls,
panelized.
all the walls were panelized, and the whole roof was pre-cut.
There's people who are you can hire to frame a roof and deliver the roof package to your framers. That they're not cutting that on site. Which was really impressive. And I think that moving in that direction is definitely going to, with the lack of knowledge, the lack of experience, the lack of people in the trades, is going to give us an opportunity to build some stuff that we otherwise wouldn't be able to.
100% agree. I think it's going to be like COVID. I think COVID is going to force us to innovate and do something. And I think the lack of people is going to force us to innovate, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that a common custom home builder would just be like, well, my home is more complicated. Well, after touring 45 White Oak, if you think your home is more than complicated, then you need to come out to Boston and check it out.
I mean, just the way that they stick build on site, when you, again, Cape Cod panel is not super advanced, but like the little crap that they do, where I'm like, that's way better, and that's like the beginning stages of this. You see people in the way that you stick build on site, and it's like, it doesn't really make that much sense at all. And there's so much waste.
How come the Nationals haven't done you think they would execute it better? I mean, that you're furrowing your brow that they already do it.
They do it. Yeah, Nationals do it.
On everything? I mean, I see apartment buildings. I see apartment buildings all the time, and they're just,
Well, no, but these you can take truss roofs and stuff. They're not like stick framing roofs. I think it comes down to costs.
There's a good mix of both.
Yeah. But being
Mike
able
Cooper
to
from the audience just chimed in. It's a good mix.
it's not even being able to do the production work in that manner. It's being able to do the custom work in that manner that I think is like pretty impressive.
What I'd like to add to that, because Mark, who modeled the entire home in 3D, is someone like he was a roof cutter.
Yep.
Like he was a master framer that knew roofs, and now he, more or less stands behind a giant monitor modeling these things in 3D that produces, a cut list that then is on, a semi-automatic saw, and they're reducing the amount of waste and bodies that it takes to assemble it and to figure it out. And, I've been a huge proponent of just the consideration of thinking a build all the way through before we start. And, the fact that White Oak was built and steel fit within 1/8 of an inch, like literally had 2 RFIs on the whole project in that framing. Like it was just boom, 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 went up and everything fit.
What was the speed?
They had that house framed in 3 weeks.
For the audience that's not here, we toured this home out in Boston, and 7,000 square foot, extremely complicated home. You can follow it on 45 White Oak, Instagram, everything, and NS Builders. But it's a very complicated home. So for it to be put out in 3 weeks is remarkable.
Yeah.
I couldn't move that lumber from one side of the site to the other in 3 weeks.
From a remodeling aspect, Tyler, what sort of innovations do you think we'll see in remodeling?
Obviously, everything's moving in like the air sealing and building science direction. I think overall health and comfort's going to be huge. I think it's going to be interesting to see what they're doing with the energy code and how that's going to affect a lot of new builds and renovations, exterior insulation, all of that stuff, affordability. I think there's going to have to be some ingenuity and some value engineering. And I mean, you even forwarded me an article as far as the insulation standards and what they're looking to change in my jurisdictions, and people coming up with different framing techniques to try and address them. So I think that there's going to be a fair amount of innovation as the energy code increases to be able to still build at a reasonable cost for people who just need stuff done and can't afford to build a net zero house.
I mean, speaking of net zero, we have one of the country's foremost experts in net zero home building. I mean, Brad, you've done some pretty incredible projects, and now you're getting projects. You spoke yesterday about after you did that incredible home for Mark, that essentially 3 other homes came off of it. And I think a lot of us, I'll just speak for myself, but a lot of builders think, oh man, think about all the time and the energy I have to devote to really figure that out. But it's a very narrow-sighted thought process, because what a lot of us haven't thought about is the doors that will open that aren't open to us now, to a clientele that we would like to work with that isn't open to us now because they don't think we can do it. Can you speak a little bit to, how doing Mark's house specifically, but just in general, it seems like a lot of the homes that you're doing are essentially future-proofing because of the way you're constructing it and the way your clients are responding to it.
Yeah, I think early on we were fortunate to do an ICF house with Sips Trusses, and that kind of led the way to me, Mark, through some other channels, and Matt Reisinger, who a lot of you know, that made that introduction, and of which, there definitely was a lot of complication doing Mark's house, right? He's in the industry. There was a lot of sponsorships, so you're working with vendors and material being donated, and you're working with a trade base that, especially in Phoenix, wasn't accustomed to doing some of the details we're doing, and so there's no question that there was an investment of time and understanding to execute the final design and vision. But at the core of it, I mean, if you're working with the proper architect, engineer, designer that understands this, the plans are there. I mean, it's just building to spec now. So there is an element of having that information there already and then just making sure it's executed, which definitely takes some additional oversight. But at the core, to answer your question, Mark, I mean, it wasn't something that intimidated me because I saw the opportunity in front. I didn't realize it would lead to what we're doing now. Matt had come out. We did some videos with Matt, and, everyone knows that Matt has a pretty big audience on his YouTube channel. And because of the video he did specifically, I mean, we had 3 clients reach out that said, hey, we didn't know a builder in Phoenix is building to this level. And we have one right now showing some of you at dinner last night, $12 million build that's going to start here in 2 months. That was a direct lead from that project. So, nice. Clients are watching the innovation, they're watching sustainability. A lot of them are very passionate about it. And so a lot of us can level up by marketing to that and just understanding it itself. I mean, there's a lot of education. I know everyone up here has been involved, whether they built it or at least understand that, the certain elements. And again, you're looking for ways to separate yourself to other companies, and net zero is definitely a way to do that.
Do you think, obviously you build, on a very high-end spectrum, let's say, for builders out there that are interested in it but are not, getting clients of that level? Because a common statement is like, oh yeah, that's good for, the extremely wealthy or whatnot. What are some early adopting things that we can do even at a lower level price tier that, maybe the home isn't completely net zero, but it's a lot better than it otherwise? What are just some simple things that you've seen that you're like, oh, that's like a no-brainer now? There's not that big of a cost ticket for the return on that investment.
It's a good question. I mean, there are elements, even if maybe you step away from net zero for just a minute, but if you're looking at healthy, right? If you're looking at ways to monitor VOC content, right? So through the mechanical design, which isn't overly expensive, but, looking at water filtration in the home, certain things that are really important to people since the pandemic. Those are ways that can kind of elevate the brand, specifically to energy efficiency. Early on, we were looking at advanced framing, which is something you can do fairly easy with a good, changing, spacing on, from 16 on center to 24 inch on center by using closed cell foam and using some other structural things, the way you do the corners to not have so much lumber, essentially, that's losing thermal, right? Triple pane windows is another option. We insulate the slab, which isn't super complicated. You can do it either with rigid foam or you can, spray closed cell as well. That's pretty easy. So, I mean, there's little things you can do just from Sips Trusses is a good one. We were just talking about panelization. So in Phoenix, we don't stick frame trusses or roofs. Everything's from a truss plant panelized. Sips Trusses isn't that much different. I mean, you're just bringing out a truss system that's already insulated. So, I mean, there's just things you can do that the cost isn't huge, but those are elements that can at least get you on the right path.
Yeah, interesting. I had someone on the podcast a couple weeks ago, and he brought up they do air filtration for commercial buildings, but he said a stat that shocked me: 90% of our lives are spent indoors. I was blown away at that number. Now, obviously, my mind, of course, went to well, what about all the people in Africa? And that was not part of his stat. I think it was. I think it was more of, the Western civilization. But that's just where my brain goes. I'm like, liar. That's not true. But anyway, the point of it is like we don't spend enough time talking about air quality and what we breathe.
But think about it, you're in your car.
No. I agree. I agree with the stat now.
Yeah.
But my point in this thing.
You're in Minnesota. No one wants to go outside in the winter.
Well, dude,
He does. He lives outside.
You said 90, right?
Yeah, 90%.
Oh, yeah.
But my point is like, okay, nutrition has become a huge thing that a lot of people, you can't go anywhere and not talk about nutrition. I mean, it's good for, whether you have kids or not, like the stuff that we eat at school lunches compared to what we ate as kids is like so different. You talked, beforehand of like what people eat in the office and like you should hire nutritionists. But like it's much more like people are more prone to talk about their lifestyle. We talked a little bit earlier on about health and wellness and anxiety and things like that, and a lot of it has to do with diet, but we're talking about that. It all starts with talking and education. Where I'm going with this is like, we spend all this time about what we eat and stress and all this stuff, but very few people talk about what you breathe. And if nothing else, I'm left with like an amazement of like what our lungs can filtrate. And so going to that, I'm curious how often you have clients that are talking about like what's the air quality. I mean, we know we have ERVs or HRVs and we're doing that, but how often do you have clients specifically ask about it?
Yeah, I mean, 10 years ago, like none. I mean, I remember having a client like 9 years ago talking about off-gassing with the paint that we'd use and stuff like that, and I was like, this is new to me. I mean, they're really obsessed about it, but that's like regular now.
Right.
I mean, it's a common thing. I mean, yeah, at least for my clients.
I think, what we'll see, and we're starting to see, but is air quality monitoring. And if you have an air quality monitor in your home, like you're gonna obsess over it. It's like when you walk by a thermostat. How warm is it in here? Like you check. We don't have there's nothing telling us how good the air quality is. But if there's a little monitor that it turns red, like you're gonna be like, what's going on? Like, why is the air quality so poor in my house? And it's gonna make us think about it and react to it. And yeah, I think that. We've kind of went the other way where it's like rather than first monitoring it, we've immediately went to like the ERV and HRV route, and we're constantly filtering it because like that's what it sounds like we need to do. But then you take that a step further and realize, oh, like now I'm seeing it and like I can visually understand when air quality is better or worse, and I have equipment in my home that can help counteract that.
I think data is going to be really important. The more we can explain simply to a client, like either the payback or the information, they're going to absorb it. I mean, we're essentially the professionals.
Look at the Whoop.
Yeah.
And like these watches that tell you how you sleep. Like I don't wear one. That's great that you wear one. I don't. And my wife, like I had this conversation with my wife, and she'd wake up and she'd be like, oh, got a shitty night of sleep. And I'm like, you've just programmed your whole day around the fact that you've been told that you had a shitty night of sleep.
I would argue that though.
To tell me that.
I don't need what are you gonna say?
Well, it's funny because I've worn one for 6 years.
Yeah.
And so, like this morning was a 26% recovery. It said rest. I went for a 5-mile run. So to me, it's kind of like you take the data, but I agree with you because it can sort of inform your lifestyle. But then I'm also kind of like, forget it.
But that's a personality thing.
Well, I'm sure.
My point there is like, that, while I don't wear it because I don't want to be pre-programmed on like how to react to my day, like I'm starting my day good, right? But what happens there is like with a lot of people, they're wearing it and they're realizing, oh, when I have 3 glasses of wine, I don't sleep well, so I'll just have 2. So it's the same thing with like in the home. It's like you start seeing like, man, every time I cook with the gas on, the air quality goes down. So I'm going to switch to an electric cooktop.
100% agree with that.
Yeah.
And that's what
Speaking of health and personality, why do you have 6 Red Bulls behind you?
Well, that's really just a humorous thing for Tyler. So Tyler famously, after the first time we ever met at a build conference, he was in the car on the way to the airport with Brad, and he goes, I think I just met my polar opposite. Because that guy, Mark, it's like someone gave him 6 cans of Red Bull and a line of Coke. And so I actually made him a shirt with 6 Red Bulls and a line of Coke on it. It looked like a white submarine. And then I sent it to him, and I tried to pitch Red Bull to be a sponsor. So Red Bull, if you're looking here, I'm just saying that Red Bull would look really good.
Yeah.
He's like, I'll get them.
We haven't found a Coke sponsor, so if you guys maybe we'll have better luck with that. I am watching Breaking Bad.
Oh my gosh!
Just now?
Yeah, I'm old fashioned now. I still read the newspaper. I'm a little behind.
You're only 10 years late.
Yeah, whatever. Well, this clearly this has gone off the rails. We were going to talk about AI, but there's no way we're going to fit all this stuff. So if you want to listen to AI, listen to the CBUSA episode that Morgan and I recorded with John Walker and Katie.
And I'm going to share a little,
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
dis not the podcast. I was going to say I'm going to share a little bit tomorrow too. Here.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. So it won't be
'cause
online, I guess.
It's a lot of information. I don't want to, do a disservice to that topic. It's pretty big. I think at this point, why don't we open up for Q&A? We've got exactly 10 minutes. Ask anything you want. Everyone up here is super open, so it could be anything we talked about or anything we haven't talked about. And then I'll just repeat the question for the audience that is not here.
Stop.
Yeah, now Mike is quiet. Yes, Ryan.
What is one of the most important things you've done with your staff in order to create the culture you want in your business?
What is the most important thing you've done to your staff? To create, okay. What is the most important thing you've done to your staff to kind of increase the culture so that your team is cohesive and is shaping up the way you want it?
I could go first. I would say we don't have, it's your schedule. You run your schedule. We treat our team as adults. If they need to take vacation, if they need to take mental health day, if they need to put their kids or family first, whatever, that comes first. And honestly, sometimes I think it's done a disservice because Kayla works around the clock and never shuts it off. And I'm like, dude, you can take a break, go on vacation, actually take a vacation. And she doesn't, but also I'm like, you're amazing and thank you for everything. And then we have quarterly C2S fun days, we call them. And we go and do something super fun with our team and their families, whether it's going golfing, and we'll do it during the workday or whatever, or go to a brewery or go whatever. And then as much as we can, on these conferences or KBIS and IBS, we try to take our whole team and have that within our goals and budget and everything. We have colleagues that are oh, it just seems like a waste of money. But for me, I'm it's about the camaraderie and we show up different. And I would say we're a pretty open and vulnerable team too. So with us, we're again, some colleagues are your team is your team, not your friends, whatever. And I'm nope, we just go right in. So I think just getting to that level too, with your team, they just show up differently for you. A few things I do.
I think for just the last year and a half around Christmas, everyone's always busy around Christmas. I've deliberately not made any meetings the month of December. So I always leave December completely open because everyone gets so stressed out. So now December's one of my favorite months because I will not have a single meeting. And I even for the podcast, I'll batch record ahead of time so that I am just more free. But then that way I can be present for the team if they need to take some time off. And then we shut down, a couple days before Christmas till the 1st. No one does any work, that needs to be done, or if you're responding, at least in office, our team, if they choose to be, a lot of our subcontractors, roofers, things are happening, obviously, that post week. So they need to be available, because if you're asking someone else to work, it's kind of this, at least I'll answer the phone to answer your question. And then the week of July 4th, we shut down for that whole week. I actually interviewed, shout out to Jackson Schwartz from Hennepin Made. He did that, and I was like, that is a great idea. So that's kind of our midweek break.
Nick does that too.
Yeah.
So, and honestly, anytime my clients or anytime my team asks for a day off, I'm like, yeah, I don't even need to know why. Yep, see you. Have a great time. Come back, come back whenever. Because if they're not present, if they're not recharged, and you also have to live it. I think if you, for a long time, if you're guilty of, answering these late night emails or texts, but really living what you say, the culture will sort of take care of itself, in my opinion. Anyone else? Otherwise,
Yeah, we got in the back.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
For each of you, managing a busy, successful business, I'm interested in how you find the time to balance your family, the business,
Don't ask.
all right, the question is how, as business owners, do we manage to balance your business with your family and personal time?
I'm going to answer this even though I am terrible. Because I think it's probably pretty relatable. generally speaking, it's all communication. So for me, like my personal stuff, like I want to go to the gym, I wake up earlier. I want to get extra hours in, I'm waking up earlier. And my wife is, hey, I need you home at 6 o'clock. And that is a non-negotiable. About a year ago, I relocated our office to 2 blocks away from my house, which gains me additional work time, but also, when the kids need to be picked up or there's something that needs to happen, I can scoot out of work and get back to work, and it's not this half-hour thing. Ultimately, it's communication, and when there's failure, on my part, and not communicating what my intent is or what my schedule is or what I need to do, or it's because I didn't properly communicate it. But I do, and I've gotten a lot of flack for this, especially sharing it on social media. Primarily my wife's friends will tell her, like, "Hey, do you see what Nick said?" But I talk about it a lot because when in order of priorities, my priority is me, my family, and then my business. And and what I mean by that is, like, if there's no me, there's no my family, and there's no business. So and I stand by that. Though, like, I think in different roles, especially like a mother versus a father, like at least in my relationship, like that doesn't always feel like an equal. Like my wife doesn't necessarily feel as though she can prioritize herself, and here I am saying all I do is prioritize myself. But it's that's my commitment to how I need to show up for my family and how I need to show up for my business. But ultimately, I learn a lot from my mistakes in business and my marriage and my, being a dad, and it's, it all centers around communication and being transparent with what, I'm trying to accomplish.
I think it's about prioritizing and being realistic with your priorities. I think that you make time for whatever's important for you in life. And, for years, business, I always said I was supporting my family. This is for my family. But at the end of the day, like, it was for me. It was for my ego. What drove me to do what I was doing, like, my family could have less. There's plenty of things that you could do if you need to spend more time with your family, whether it's conceding to a different lifestyle. You just have to be realistic with yourself. Like, if you want to spend more time with your family, there's a million ways that you can do that. And it may not have to be with growing your business and building your business more. Like, that's and there's nothing wrong with that. But being real with yourself and honest with yourself that, like, this is what drives me more so than potentially spending time with the family. I think that once you understand that and realize that, like, this is okay, this is what makes me tick, this is who I am, you realize that, like, you make time for whatever you want to make time for in your life.
Yeah, and I would add to that too, like, I love working, so it really does. I would probably rather work than take a vacation, honestly. There's something probably wrong with me, but I think it took me a while to accept that that was okay.
Yeah.
Like, that can be a priority. And I think there's many times I share this on social media, like, Jamie and I have missed birthdays. We've missed a lot of things with our kids. I've had summits over my kids' birthdays, and, like, accepting that that's okay. And then also leaning, right? Like I said, with these guys in my situation, that happened. It's like leaning on your people and being okay with that too. Like, there's other people that can help you and show up for things that need to. So, like Tyler was just saying too, like, our priority each week changes, each month changes, and sometimes work's priority, sometimes family's priority, and we just try to find that balance of when we say no to things that on our personal side too, because honestly I would rather be working, or maybe it is on the family or work or whatever, and just making sure.
I'm going to go out on a limb but say that it's probably more difficult to deal with those feelings as a mother.
Yes, 100%.
So, like, I have a ton of respect. Yeah. My wife works. Mm-hmm. She would love to spend every single second with our kids. Me, not necessarily. Like, a little bit of time's good. But, like, I know the challenge that she faced and the guilt that she faced, that she does also want to pursue a career while raising children.
Which, unfortunately, that's because of society, and I think we need to break that barrier.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me to answer that question, I think I've probably been more successful taking steps away, but I think my business has something. Like I make less now than I did 5 years ago, but I'm much happier than I was 5 years ago. I mean, I guess that's a lie. I'm always pretty happy,
Come on,
but
we're in your life now.
I'm more satisfied. And part of it is I mean, I've talked about it all the time, so I won't go ad nauseum about it. But for me, it's early mornings. You know, I think. Honestly, going back, I just keep re-saying it. It's boundaries create freedom. So for me, it's like I have to be home every morning at 7 a.m. because that's when my kids get up. That's when I take them to school. That's kind of my role and responsibility, that and bedtime and everything else. And so it's like, so morning is like, you know, I'm from 5 a.m. to 7. Like that's me time. You know, running, working out, whatever. I need to get off all that energy to get more energy. It's kind of a weird thing. I'm not sure why that happens. And then, you know, so it's like that parameter. And then, as I already mentioned previously, I'm home every day at 5 to 5:05. And that really, I can't believe what a benefit that has been. And honestly, I've actually won a job because of it. And I've told this story before, but I'll just be brief about it. I had a couple that was, they never had children. And they were both doctors, and they loved work, and he never wanted to not work. And he said, I want to meet you nights and weekends. And Brad actually, it was another builder like Brad here in Minnesota market, had told me he took a Saturday job for 2 years at 11 a.m. And he said he missed 2 years of his daughter's life. And it was because of that story, because of podcasts, because of people sharing that I told this client, I said, no. I said, I'm done at 5 o'clock. We don't do texts. We don't meet on the weekends. And perhaps I am not the right builder for you, and that's okay. And I wouldn't have been able to say that earlier in my career because this was the nicest home I'd ever built. You guys toured it. It was the Metal House. Yeah. And it was an incredible home, wood from Africa. I mean, it was my dream job. And the client respected me so much for setting that boundary that he picked me over the other builder. And I was able to pair him with an architect that his children were all in college and beyond. So he had that capacity to fit that client's need. But it was really because of that boundary that allowed me to do that. And so I don't think anyone can say they do it perfectly. It's like one moment of time you feel good. It's like running a marathon. Not every mile is going to feel great. It's like maybe mile 2 feels good, mile 12 stinks, mile 20, oh man, get me over it. Then 21, you're feeling good. I think that's a little bit like running a business. It's like you're constantly checking in. As long as you're communicating with your family and yourself and your team, I feel like as soon as you figure it out, you fall down. And so it's like...
It's all a season. I tell myself that every single day. Oh, I'm in a new season today. It's just a season. It'll pass.
Brad, you got anything? Or
Yes, I mean, not a whole lot to offer, but I mean, the reality is you only have so many buckets, and you just have to monitor which one's full and empty. And so for me, it's just really being aware of, you know, having 6 kids, 5 daughters, like... I have a few daughters that are a lot older now, like in college, and so I'm very aware as they need, and I restructure things. You know, being married, same thing, travel in there, and so it's definitely a daily thing that I'm monitoring, whether it's business or family, and you know how I pivot. So.
Yeah, and I mean, in full disclosure, I mean, Brad knows about this. I got an email on Monday during CBUSA from my wife, and she's like, "We need to have a talk. You know, your work schedule is getting a little out of hand." I'm like. And I responded. I said, you know, let's sit down. I have this, you know, massive schedule for 25. I'm like, I'd be happy to sit down over dinner and talk about
over next year's calendar.
Yeah, and so like I haven't heard back from my wife, so we'll see if she wants to have that meeting. But like, at 10 o'clock at work, and she never emails me at work, and she.
Bro, I would have been on a plane home.
No, I was in Minnesota. I was in Minneapolis. I got home.
Oh my gosh.
I would have went to her work. I'd be like, what's up?
Isn't your wife a doctor?
She is a doctor. Yeah, I would just walk right into the operating room.
Broke my arm.
Yes.
Broke my arm. I'm like, I need help.
Okay, that's an interesting tactic right there.
Oh my gosh.
Huh. No,
that's the way I heard it.
No. I did. She never responded to the email. I saw her for dinner that night. She didn't bring it up. I responded. I'm ready and open to talk about it.
Wait, and you never addressed it at dinner?
No, she doesn't. At dinner, it's like mission critical.
So there's just like an elephant sitting in your dining room.
Yeah. No, I told her I'm ready anytime she wants to talk about it. Clearly, we've gone off the rails big time here. We really need to bring a marriage therapist, a psychologist, and a nutritionalist to this podcast.
I've gotten a text like that once in our relationship. And I just drove home. She goes, "What are you doing?"
I just drove
home. I'm like, I mean, your text is like literally a novel, and there's an issue here.
Oh my gosh.
I want you to come home. I'm like, well, I can't work right now.
That's fair. So what did she do?
She was like, we're fine. Okay.
Oh my word.
Well, that is our mic drop for this episode. I'm not sure how else we can really do anything. Thanks for joining the Curious Builder podcast, coming to you Monday and Thursdays. And Contractor Coalition has been a blast, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for listening to the Curious Builder podcast. If you like what you listen to, please give us a 5-star rating and write us a review. It really means a lot. It's a great way for us to just understand what you like about the podcast and what we can keep doing. So like and review, and please share with your friends and family. Find out more at curiousbuilderpodcast.com.